first question, it's an easy one, but why is equality important in Hollywood and workplaces across the country, and why should this fight be a priority?
I can't believe we have to ask questions like that.
Well, we do.
I mean, I understand that you do, but I mean, I feel like, I think, when I started out in this industry, and tell me if you felt the same way, I felt like, women were always talking about this, being equal. And I had this attitude that I'm a little ashamed of now, saying, like, you have to just do it instead of talking about it. Just do it. Mm-hmm. Set an example for the other people around you. But now you realize not everybody has the ability to set an example. Not everybody's in the position to be hiring and to be a woman and to be promoting other women, or to trust that a man is going to be promoting other women and hiring the right amount of women. So it is a conversation that unfortunately needs to be happening. And I finally feel like we're at a time in this world where there are changes being made, because nobody's going to shut up about it. And now we have men on our side fighting for us.
I don't want to delve into politics too deeply this morning, Chelsea, but you recently said that the Me Too movement is, quote, a complete referendum on Donald Trump being elected to the presidency. Please quickly elaborate on this theory, and how has that election impacted the way that we look at women in the workplace and women at large in society?
Well, I mean, we elected a sexual predator, and we all knew it. We all knew about it, and we still did it. So now we have to reconcile that with ourselves. 54% of white women voted for Donald Trump. So that's called, the morning after, I think. And the only way for us to, it's obvious to me, it's obvious. I think everything is a referendum, and I'm grateful. I'm grateful that we're having this movement, the Time's Up movement, that we're having the Me Too movement, because if Hillary Clinton had been elected, I don't think we'd be all talking about this.
Ashley, you've been instrumental in making this movement happen. You were one of the first women to come forward and publicly accuse Harvey Weinstein of sexual assault and abuse. Yes, clap for that. Thank you. Thank you. That ultimately led to dozens of women coming forward with similar stories, and also paved the way for people, both men and women across industries, to come forward and tell their stories of sexual abuse, assault, and even rape. Did you realize that one act of bravery would have this colossal domino effect?
I'm very glad that it did.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what has changed is that folks are finally able to hear the message, because I'd been telling the story since literally the moment it happened. That particular example of harassment that occurred at the Peninsula Hotel, my dad was waiting for me downstairs in the lobby. I exited the room. My dad could tell by the look on my face that something devastating had happened, which was his word. I told him, I told everyone with whom I was filming Kiss the Girls that night, I told my agent, but as someone so pithily said, we didn't have an attorney general of Hollywood-dom to whom to report this kind of illegal and criminal behavior. And when I told the story to Variety 2 years prior to the New York Times, folks talked about it, but then it stopped. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad that the container of these incidents and patterns has been shattered. And the point of the lawsuit is for there finally to be economic remedy for those of us who have experienced damage to our careers and opportunities as a result of illegal and criminal behavior. And
just to back up really quickly, 2 seconds. Last week, you filed suit against Harvey Weinstein for defamation.
Yes.
And you have claimed that he not only badmouthed you to director Peter Jackson, but he told him that you were impossible to work with, that you would be a nuisance, and that you weren't worth the trouble. Had you been aware that there was a smear campaign, that one person was running against you?
I only found out when Peter Jackson and Fran Walsh told their story a couple of months ago.
So this entire time you had no idea that this had been done to you?
I mean, I knew that Harvey couldn't stand me because I stood up to him, and he would fairly spit my name at me when I ran into him at events, but I didn't know that he was defaming me. And so, of course, the lawsuit includes that he may no longer defame me or retaliate. And it happens so commonly, especially to women in workplaces across the country, that shift that goes away, the loss of opportunity for overtime that's economically advantageous, being overlooked for the plum assignment, obviously not getting a promotion. And those things hurt American families. I mean, we're already making less money than our male counterparts, and particularly when that intersects with race and ethnicity and gender and sexual orientation. And so I'm really excited that we can bring an economic remedy to American workers who experience sexual harassment.
Let's talk about yes, please. Feel free to clap when you feel it, all right? This is a clap-friendly zone. Nina Shaw, I want to talk to you about the legal ramifications of Ashley's suit. Do you think that this suit in particular, if she is indeed successful, will have a ripple effect, and will we be seeing more suits like this?
Well, I think one of the things that we should focus on, which Ashley spoke about, is illegal activity. I mean, a lot of this is described in the press as abuses of power, sexual harassment, but we're really talking about activities that are prohibited by law. So, of course, law is your remedy. This makes absolute sense, and anyone who says it doesn't, anyone who says that this is too remote and too difficult, is really buying into these societal pressures that tell us that women's work isn't valued. Because all Ashley is really saying is that my appeal at this time in my career was clearly measurable, and this particular opportunity would have built upon that, and that I was stopped from that activity through actions not having to do with my, with who I am or what I could do as a professional, but merely because someone else wanted to retaliate because I wouldn't grant them sexual favors. That's very, very clear. So let's kind of take this out of the realm of feelings and put it into the realm of law, which is where it belongs. Thank you.
Pleasure. And anything that we do recuperate will go to the Time's Up Legal Defense Fund, which allows workers across the country to access quality legal services when they're addressing sexual, illegal, and criminal behavior in their workplaces.
Nina, I want to talk to you about the Time's Up Legal Defense Fund. You are one of the founding members of Time's Up. Since January, more than 2,500 women, that's 2,500 women, have sought assistance from the Legal Defense Fund.
Yeah, and I want to make that point.
And you raised $21 million also.
It's also so people. It's not just women.
Okay.
Because the Time's Up Legal Defense Fund is open to anyone who has been discriminated against in the workplace under certain criteria. So let's be really clear about that. And one of the reasons we wanted to do this as a legal defense fund is that we understood that this could not be a movement that was about the red carpet. It had to be about all the carpets, including the carpets in this room, which will be cleaned by people once we leave here who are not paid commensurate with their responsibilities, and often wages that allow them to support their families. So this was about intersectionality. It was about letting everyone know that we at Time's Up were grateful to Ashley and others like her who came forward and who shone a bright light on this, but ultimately we were about making sure that there was a remedy that was available to people across the spectrum. And I can't emphasize that enough, because the truth of it is, in this fight, in what may be really one of the last great civil rights movements, we are all in this together, or we are not in it at all.
And it's worth noting that over 60% of the folks who've contacted the Legal Defense Fund identify as low income.
Absolutely.
Chelsea?
And it's worth noting that you can still contribute to the Legal Defense Fund, whether you're a man or a woman.
Yes.
And no contribution is too small.
Correct.
And regular monthly contributions are appreciated.
Make it an automatic payment, people.
What a nice Mother's Day gift while we're at it, okay?
That is a great Mother's Day gift.
That is a great idea.
Too bad I'm not a mother.
Chelsea, I want to talk to you. They're laughing. I love it. I want to talk to you about gender pay inequality in the workplace. It's a pervasive issue. I remember an interview that a former head of Sony, who happened to be a female, gave a few years ago, and she essentially argued that women would make more money if they asked for more money. Do you think the onus is on women to ask for more money in the workplaise?
Well, it shouldn't be, but it is up. You have to try. You have to do whatever you can to be treated equally. So I think something that I experienced early on in my career when I was coming up is that I found. Everyone said, what was it like to be a comedian in a male-dominated industry? Right. What was it like being one of the only girls? And at the time, there were very few girls that were on TV or anything like that. There were some, but it wasn't the. They said, what was it like to be treated by the men in that? It wasn't the men that thwarted anything I did or tried to intimidate me. It was women, not other comedians. It was women in positions of power that kind of kept me at bay. They were the ones that didn't want you to succeed. And for me, at that age, I was so taken aback because I'm like, wait, we're supposed to be in this together. Right. And it was women that could book me at comedy clubs, or that had, that I had a TV deal with. They'd be like, oh, I don't think she's talented enough. She's too this, she's too that. And that is the problem. That's what's so pervasive, is that women are taught that if one of us succeeds, the rest of us can't. And quite the opposite, I believe, is true. When one of us succeeds, many others get to succeed. So I think that's something that we all have to remember.
Nina, that actually brings me to one of my favorite quotes of yours, and I want to make sure I get this right. It says, you have said, if you want to be a woman in power, then empower other women.
Yeah, I believe strongly in that, and it's first started for me in an observation that I made that so many of the women who spoke publicly about pay inequality, for example, were for the most part represented exclusively by men. So here it is, they didn't help the women within their agencies and management companies and law firms actually advance in their careers because they didn't make them their primary representative. And that had to just stop. Because the truth of it is that you are only as powerful as a representative as your clients. And when you can walk in the door and you represent women like the women on this stage, well, that says something about your ability to get the best terms possible. But don't underestimate, and this is really what Chelsea speaks to, how we are all acculturated, okay? Because it cuts across all, people on the gender spectrum. It's just an amazing thing. When you think about the fact, if a woman makes more money in our business, her agent and her manager and her attorney make more money. So why would you not advocate for people who you represent to make more money? It's in your benefit. And that really speaks to how we're acculturated to believe that women should make less and certain other people should make less, even against our own self-interest. But I feel very strongly that the more you empower women in the representative community, the benefit will inure to the talent.
Ladies, one of the most glaring examples of pay inequality in Hollywood was made public late last year when it was discovered that Mark Wahlberg got paid $1.5 million for reshoots for All the Money in the World, and his co-star Michelle Williams got paid less than $1,000. To put that number in perspective, she made less than 0.1% of what Mark Wahlberg
She was
made.
paid per diem, $80 a day.
A day.
His
And he was paid-
co-star represented at the same agency. Let's not forget that.
Correct. How does something like this happen? And is this an anomaly or is this indicative of a larger issue?
I think that all of the points that were made weave into this particular story, and the element that I would emphasize is pay transparency. And when we know what our colleagues are making, then we're better positioned to advocate our own financial best interests. And I was on a chat thread with a bunch of female actors when Michelle found out that she had been paid so poorly. And the support that we were able to give each other really speaks to the value of strong female-to-female alliances.
What was her reaction?
Well, she was shattered, and the rest of us were so galled on her behalf. And we were able to rally and give her a lot of support as we both encouraged her to stand up for herself and talked about ways to approach the agency and who to call and in what order to do it, and to enlist male allies with whom we had positive relationships who are also represented at the same agencies, started calling the bosses over the weekend saying, hey, I just found out about this, not okay. And it's so important.
Is that how you said it, or was it a little more?
Well, there were a lot of people who were enlisted, who spoke with their own authentic voices, and the power of relationship really was demonstrated in that example. And then, of course, William Morris Endeavor did make a donation to the Time's Up Legal Defense Fund as part of its restitution. And I would also speak to the value of restitution. There have been some conversations about when we bring men back into the fold after they have aggressed. And I believe in restorative justice, and I believe that equality needs to have all kinds of parties involved for there to be a definition of equality. But the self-inquiry must come first. You have to have self-inquiry, the humility and vulnerability to say, wow, I was wrong. Please help teach me in the ways in which I was wrong. And how do I remedy that, have appropriate restitution, and then you earn your reinstatement.
Right, and also how about we live in a moment of uncomfortableness?
Absolutely.
I see, when I speak to large groups of men especially, I can see the discomfort on their faces. I can see them almost like tense up. But
none of the men in this room today.
Well, no, there should be some men in this room who feel that way, not because they've necessarily done anything themselves, but because they're not really clear about where we go from here. And they have to have some comfort in knowing that that's what happens in a civil rights movement. All the civil rights movements that we know about from history books. And all we see is the end result. But there was a lot of discomfort in the process. And that's what happens when you're trying to make systemic change. And that's what we're trying to do here. So let's not.
And I think also to speak to Ashley, what Ashley said is that redemption is such a key component to this. You know, it's not men are like, oh no, what are we going to do now? It's like, we're not telling you to get rid of men forever. Like, we just want to be there with you. We want to be by your side in equal numbers.
Chelsea, that's a good point. How do we go about making men allies and advocates? How do we go about convincing them that it's their fight also and it's worth it for them to get involved?
I don't think we should be having to convince men after everything we've seen over the past year and a half. I mean, it's pretty obvious that things are unfair and imbalanced. And if you think it should continue that way, then you've got bigger problems. Because it's not going to. It's just not going to. Men are on the side. Any, well-educated, that's not the only thing you need, obviously, as we've learned in the last 24 hours. You need a lot more than that. But, anybody who wants this world to go forward in the best way possible knows that the more people in the mix, the better. The more females that are successful, it's been proven. It's, you could read a million different books about it. You could read a million different articles about it. One of which I read today I think it was the New Yorker this morning. But, and it's about minorities, it's about women, it's about inclusiveness for everybody.
I want to talk to you about inclusiveness. One of the things I loved about your two shows is how diverse they were. You had female comedians, black female comedians, openly gay comedians. You had an entire mix always. Was that a deliberate mission of yours to make sure that your panels and the people that you interviewed were always diverse, or was that something that just
I was just trying to entertain myself. No,
but serious. Or was that something that just came second nature to you? Did you not even think about it? Because again, when you were in the position to use your platform for good and for the advancement of all people, you have done so.
Well, thank you. I definitely had, from my experience earlier on with the women that kind of tried to, thwart my success, or however you want to say that. I made it a priority to have absolutely diversity and have an equal number of women working in the office and have them on the air with me. Absolutely. I didn't want anyone to ever feel like I was a woman treating women badly. So I made sure, I was very conscious of that, but it was also very natural. That's how I grew up with those people. They were all my friends, coming up in stand-up. So once I got a show, I'm like, we all got a job.
Chelsea's really talking about normalization.
Right.
I mean, we act like what's going on in the C-suite and the boardrooms is normal and makes sense. It doesn't. It doesn't even reflect often for companies, they're consumers. So Chelsea's really talking about, I wanted a world that reflected the world that I live in. And that's really just normalization. It's not so much about inclusion and diversity. It's about making the world up here reflect the greater world. So it makes sense.
Ashley, what will change in Hollywood look like for you? Walk me through your dream scenario.
Well, Hollywood would be a kinder, more tender place. So I am happy that WME, where I am represented, has signed on to 50-50 by 2020. And I was a part of the meeting that went in with a couple of other female actors and made that direct request, which was agreed to on the spot. And then eventually they realized that meant promoting 2 women to the top leadership positions. And that has to happen. I think that, the representation that Stacey speaks of so eloquently and with so much data behind it is what an improved Hollywood would look like to me. I'm on a show called Berlin Station. This year our writer's room happens to be more female than male. Last year we were striving for 50-50 with our directors, but it's harder for a woman director to uproot her family and go to Europe to direct, and so the tax incentives in California that allow women directors to stay at home with their families while directing in California is important. So there would be a multilateral, sort of multi-stakeholder series of responses that promote the normalization of equality, as Nina so elegantly put it.
Chelsea, what would that look like for you?
I think we're working on it. All the language that's been put into these provisions and these commitments by these talent agencies and by studios who have signed up and said, yeah, we're going to do that. This is what this is what our goals are for 2020 or for whenever the time was put on it. I think I think it's exactly the same. I mean, we shouldn't be having this conversation forever. We should have the conversation, things should change, and then we should move on to the next conversation to fix something.
Nina, some people have said, I'm over this conversation, I want it to go away. I read an article where you so efficiently said that that's not going to happen.
Well, yeah, it's not going to happen. This is a movement where people are gaining their civil rights. When you give people their rights, they don't want you to take them back. And also, we're talking about systemic change at the top, which has to filter down to the bottom. So there is no going back. And to people who are sitting around thinking, I'll just be quiet, I'll just stay in my lane, and 6 months from now, everything will be back to where it was. That's just not going to happen. That doesn't reflect the reality of life. So let's just figure out a way that we all move together. I just believe that's true.
You also said that you do understand that people don't necessarily want to give up privilege. We spoke about that yesterday. And you sort of,
well, you
played devil's advocate. You said you understand where that
there are few
impulse comes
people
from.
of privilege who really think that they are there entirely based on that privilege, or even partially based on that privilege. When those CEOs look in the mirror, they think, I am just the smartest guy in the room, and that's why I'm here. And they discount all the other factors that got them to where they are. So a lot of this means looking uncomfortably at what really contributed to parts of your success. First of all, we all got a big hands up when we got born in this country, in this time. You know, they're just things they're factors that even for people of color like us, who have been so historically discriminated against, we're just in a better place now to be born in this time. Well, except statistically, not if you're a black man, but at any rate. But there are real things that we just have to recognize and just take that really hard look. And that's what I ask of all of us, not just guys, not just women, just all people, wherever they stand. Look honestly in the mirror and talk about how you're going to be a part of the change. I always say, where you are now, where you stand, be part of change. When other men in your group say to you, damn, I think that was just a date and Aziz didn't really do anything, have a real conversation about it. Have a real conversation about this and really stand up for what you know is right. And don't be afraid among your male companions to do that, because that's the only way change is going to happen.
I had an executive the other day say something to me, like, he goes, when is this movement going to be over? Like, time's up on time's up. And I said, it's going to be over when you stop asking questions like that.
Yeah.
Women aren't notorious for sexually harassing men in the workplace. We're not getting plants out and masturbating in front of them. That's just not our thing. So it may happen once in a while, but systemically it's not a problem. So you're the problem, not you guys, but you know who you are.
I think it's also interesting to open up a conversation about how privilege is actually constraining for those who live within and exercise their privilege.
Oh, that's a very
and that
good point.
it diminishes the humanity and the abilities of those who live within that confining space. And organizations like MVP, Mentoring Violence Prevention, and what's Ted's organization? Oh, damn it.
Oh, I know. I'm sorry.
Ted Bunch.
Ted Bunch.
Ted who?
A Call to Men. I love that organization.
Yeah. Thank you.
Because the patriarchy and misogyny defines male behavior in ways that are very abusive and restrictive. And boys and men should have the opportunity to live in the full bandwidth of their humanity, just as girls and women should too. And privilege does not allow that to happen.
Chelsea, you're working with Emily's List and campaigning for candidates who support women's rights. I have to ask you, have you ever considered a run for office?
I could not survive on that salary, so no. Thank you.
I had a slogan for you. Chelsea's got it handled.
No. I'm not. No.
I'll leave now. Okay. But so no, you.
No, I'm very, very. I mean, I'm going around the country. I'm campaigning for candidates I believe in, candidates who are pro-choice, candidates who want to overturn Citizens United and take money out of politics so that we can all stop spending so much money, so that our representatives are coming home on the weekends and actually working and not going around fundraising. It's disgusting what's happening. You can buy your way into government, and we can overturn Citizens United. We can have publicly funded elections. We have to find candidates who, support gun reform. So these are all issues that I am very passionate about, and I will be relentless until the midterms because it is an emergency situation.
She's for real. I get a lot of emails from her.
Yeah. I harass everybody, whether they like it or not.
That's what you got to do. Ashley, a run for office for you? Ever consider it?
Well, I almost ran. In 2014, I was prepared to run for the Senate from the Commonwealth of Kentucky, and life had a different plan for me at that particular moment. A young person in my family came to live with me, so I parented her for a year, and that took me out of that particular cycle. My earnest prayer is that I'm useful wherever I am, and right now this seems to be where I am most useful. I've gotten a lot of advice from people. You know, I think the great Milan Verveer, who's even here today, said I would be a caged bird in the United States Senate, and later that day someone said I would be a songbird in the United States Senate. So I don't know at this time. That's an authentic and sincere answer, but I'm going to keep showing up and struggling for social justice and doing the next good, right, honest thing, and being myself, and we'll see where that takes me.
And Nina, last word. Yep, clap for that. Yes.
No, I'm never running for office.
They're flashing the zero, flashing. No, but what's the one thing, the one small thing that we all can do to help bring about equality in the workplace?
Okay, I always call this kind of the air I breathe. I have a law firm. We're about 20 lawyers, half men, half women. The partnership is majority people of color and women. And every day I walk in there, I feel like it's the air I can breathe. So you have to, when you're in rooms that are not normalized, that are not inclusive, that are not diverse, you've got to sit there and say, I cannot breathe this air anymore. What am I going to do?